Namaste and welcome to a new session of insightful conversations at BhāratShakti. Today we are going to explore a topic that is part of our ongoing studies and exploration that we are doing through our online journal Renaissance, which is on art. And the topic that we are taking today is art for Chittashuddhi, purification of the heart in educational contexts. And we have with us today our esteemed guests, Ms. Jayashree Ashok and Cyntha Gonzales.
Namaste.
Welcome to Sri Aurobindo Society. So I'll just briefly introduce each of our guests with us today, and then we'll go straight into our conversation. Jayashree Ashok, as some of our regular readers of Renaissance and those who've been following our work at BhāratShakti might already be familiar with, Jayashree has been involved with us in various projects, and we also do annual workshops at Creative School, which was co-founded by Jayashree Ashok, and you can read more about that on our website. But in terms of her background, she's been deeply inspired by the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother on integral education. And led by that, she co-founded, along with her husband, Mr. B. Ashok, Prajña Wisdom Living Center, and also Creative School, which is part of that Prajña Healing Trust. And this is at Bengaluru. She has extensive experience in the areas of education, working on the ground and researching various alternative educational approaches and pedagogies. And she's also spent considerable amount of time studying the integral education as practiced at Auroville. She's created several frameworks which are part of the regular curriculum at Creative School, which are called Sacred Classroom, Sacred Living, Sacred Parenting, and Life and Living. These are all inspired by the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother on integral education. And one of her deep passions is the implementation of vital education in Creative School, in teaching learning contexts. She was inspired by a deep shift in her own consciousness, which led her to kind of give up an illustrious career in tech industry in the US and move to India and start Creative School as well as the Prajña Wisdom Healing Center. She is well trained in various healing modalities herself and conducts a lot of individual and group sessions on healing and transformation. And next, we also have Cyntha Gonzales, who's been a long-time associate with Ms. Jayashree at Creative and Prajña. Now, Cyntha brings, again, decades of very, very long experience in transpersonal counseling and healing work, specifically through arts-based approaches, which also incorporate breath work, mind-body work, Kundalini yoga, and many other modalities. She's worked with people across cultures. She's lived in, 6, 7 countries, and in very highly diverse settings. She's been practicing meditation since her teens and is a lifelong seeker of that higher truth which animates all existence and life. And she has, as I said, a long experience of healing work for individuals, couples, groups in various contexts, including Creative School and Prajña Healing Center, which is going to be our focus today. So in terms of her professional credentials, I'll just brief on that a little bit. She has a Master's of Science in Consciousness, Spirituality and Transpersonal Psychology from UK. She has another Master's in Transpersonal Counseling from California Institute of Integral Studies, US. She's a certified holotropic breathwork practitioner, professional life coach, certified hypnotist, certified Reiki master, Kundalini yoga teacher, and the founder of Creative Response Therapy, which is one of the main art-based modalities they use at Creative in the educational context. So we would like to know more about that. And this is just a very brief introduction of you, Cyntha, as well as Jayashree. But through our conversation, we hope we'll get to know more about your work. So let me just first begin with Jayashree. Can you just speak a little bit about, in terms of your association with Cyntha, how it started and how you were inspired to bring this in the context of the work that you do at Creative, in the educational context and also in the Healing Center. So,
thank you, Belu. Thank you for this opportunity to SAS and just being here. So Creative started with a very clear vision of being a space for self-transformation, growth and awareness and self-transformation for adults and in age-appropriate ways for children. So I started the school 15 years ago, and I was always on the lookout for modalities which will help us understand ourselves better in practical ways, not just reading the book, but actually applying it in our everyday life. And early on, when Creative started, I'd already trained in a lot of self-awareness work with Marshall Rosenberg and other teachers, mindfulness teachers, yoga teachers, as well as meditation. And in working with small children, one thing that becomes very clear is children really relate to art. Art is just natural for them. And as a beautiful universal synchronicity brings people together, it turns out that a few years after starting school, I was already working with teachers and children with different awareness, yoga or meditation-based methods, methods-based, which are kid-friendly in many ways, with mandalas and pookalams and everything. And suddenly I come across this lady called Cyntha, who I was volunteering actually with a spiritual organization at that time, who were organizing a global conference. And the volunteer task that was given to me was to invite all the facilitators who will conduct sessions during this global spiritual conference. And I ended up with Cyntha's resume. So I wrote to her, and the minute I read it, my heart just went like, this is perfect, because when I read about CRT, it just clicked. And I felt that this would be a great way to explore ourselves, not just cognitively or using the breath or with awareness, but also through art. Because I've seen children every week in school, on Monday morning, we begin with art. And we find that it settles their being more than just closing their eyes and sitting in meditation. Because children relate to dynamic forms. So when I read, my first thought was, of course, I wanted to experience it for myself. That's another, literally a policy we have in Creative is we don't offer anything to children that we've not tried out ourselves. So I attended her workshop as well. In addition to being the organizer, I just sat in her workshop and spent 2 days, and then very quickly invited her to school. So some of my teachers could experience that. And also she was kind enough to do a 1-day workshop for children. And the kids just loved it. So once Cyntha came and left, she came one more time to do a 4-day retreat for us. And I started experimenting with just what Cyntha will talk more about it, with spontaneous painting with children. And the modalities that I tried with the kids, which really worked, was spontaneous painting, a whole body version of spontaneous painting, where children, paint inside their body outline, and it leads to a lot of insights. And using the medium of clay. These were the 3 I experimented with. Although Cyntha can share many more, which would also be kid-friendly, like collages, and I think we did do face painting and mask as well once. But this led to me then re-inviting her again. I found some of our older children very perceptive, very emotionally intelligent. So I had this idea in my head. What if the kids were already learning breath work, they were learning a lot of self-awareness, how does one, NVC-based self-awareness. So they were learning different tools. I sincerely believe that when a child graduates, they shouldn't graduate with just English and math, but they should graduate with a toolkit so they can live their lives well. And what better than to invite Cyntha to teach them CRT, so the older kids could experience it for themselves. And this happened over COVID. We did it online. A group of children signed up for 3 retreats. She did it completely online. And out of that little experiment, of course, I also, with Cyntha's complete blessing and permission, told them that if you want to train in this, you can. for those who want to train. And I'm glad that at least 2 of them are taking it forward.
Okay.
And actually training so they can offer sessions to others as well with CRT. But for a lot of them, it was just self-exploration using art, which is more intuitive, and often there are certain elements that show up in art which can take you by surprise. So this was our experience. I've known Cyntha now for a decade, and she has just her commitment, her presence. When she is there, she's there 100%. There's no two ways about it. And I know that with your experience, she can be all over the world. But really, what she offers at Creative is almost a seva, because she's definitely not doing it for monetary reasons. Let me put it that way. And thank you for your generosity and offering. This year, we re-invited her because CRT has been very useful with children. So far, it has been me and one of my Sambhavi, who's also my daughter, who've been holding sessions, and I'm like, okay, this is so effective. Can we train more teachers? So Cyntha is going to take 25 of my teachers so we can do simple CRT exercises with children. Not full-blown therapy, but even the simple CRT allows them, the silence in the room is amazing. You know, kids who are so restless with all forms of meditation, the minute they get into spontaneous painting or clay, there's a silence that comes in the room and they're completely within themselves. And that is worth everything. And our school is committed to offering that at least once a month, if not twice a month. For that, I need a larger team trained. And Cyntha is very graciously training a team of 25 teachers with this.
Wonderful.
So
Wonderful.
So I think maybe I've given a very long answer, but
no, this is great.
I just wanted to give you the whole context.
Yes, no, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Maybe I can also share a little bit, if it's okay, or we can wait
Yeah.
on the different ways in which we have utilized CRT, or should we do that later
Maybe
in
after
school?
we know a little bit more about
CRT, and then
we can
I'm happy to
come
share
back to
in
this.
the school context.
But I think what you were just sharing, the last bit about, how meditate, when trying to tell kids to, sit and meditate in quiet, they become a little restless, but art, that dynamism of the art creative process can help them go within. And it's sort of like, what Mother had pointed out very beautifully, that the discipline of art has at its core the same principle, which is the discipline of yoga, which is going within. So in a very dynamic way, art really takes them within. So the silence, the quietness comes naturally. It's not imposed that you have to kind of, sit in silence like that. Just the dynamic process itself makes them go within. So we would like to know a little bit more specifically on this CRT, Creative Response Therapy, and how you came up with this, and what has been your experience of implementing this in educational teaching learning contexts.
Thank you so much, brother. So let me just start with, I first want to honor California Institute of Integral Studies, which, interestingly enough, had its initial influences with Aurobindo.
Yes.
The foundation, the creation of it was through Aurobindo. And why is it called now? It used to be called Asian Institute of Integral Studies. Now it's called California Institute of Integral Studies. It was based on the integral model here. So I just really want to honor the full circle here, because I did my studies in the mid-'80s there. And so here I am. So I'm just really touched by this beautiful synchronicity. So that's the first thing.
That's how Mother brings us together. Yes.
At the right time.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the second thing is I want to just honor the definition of transpersonal, because that will further inform creative response therapy.
Sure.
So transpersonal, the idea, the two words, transpersonality, so transcending the personality. So the definition has evolved over the decades. It's a newer form of the psychology field. And basically the essence is it has 3 aspects. One, transpersonal psychology is transcending one's personality, going into altered states of consciousness or expanded states of consciousness. Secondly, it has a mind-body connection, honoring the importance of the body, so we're not divorcing from the body. And then thirdly, there's a quality of something that's giving back. There's a quality of seva, there's a quality of transformation, that anyone that does it is being transformed, as well as giving service for the greater good of the whole world, actually. So all these aspects inform transpersonal psychology. Now, creative response therapy, I would say the initial roots come from I had a huge influence at which you mentioned being certified in holotropic breathwork. So it's a breathwork modality created by Stan and Christina Groff. And at the end of 3-hour breathwork session, you do a spontaneous mandala. So you have a piece of paper with a circle in the middle, and then you just somehow in a nonverbal fashion give expression to your 3-hour experience. As I did these more and more, I noticed that there was such potential in this, that so much came up in this. And then I would add other influences. My grandmother was an artist. She had a huge influence on me over the years. And I would go on and I could say a lot more. But what I will say is that as I got more and more into the healing world and the psychology world, what I recognized is our world is very left brain dominant. And in the development of a child, and this comes back to the education, in the development of a child, in the beginning, like Jayashree said, that we have this love for art, the love for play, the love for spontaneity. It comes so naturally. But as soon as the child hits approximately age 7, the rational mind kicks in. And we move further and further away from that intuitive function, which is so primordial. And it's underdeveloped, and it's certainly underdeveloped in the most of the education systems across the world, as I have discovered. And so what creative response therapy does is reintegrate that back in a way that it was left off when we were little children. And so so one of the ways that doing it is to always do the work with the left hand. Originally, I did it with the non-dominant hand, but I saw that wasn't enough. It needed to be the left hand, because then that way we're bringing more focus or dominance to the right side of the brain, which of course sees things more in wholes, see things non-linear, trusts irrationality, trusts intuition. And it's a gateway into our subconscious. And that's where the word therapy comes in. So there's always a healer aspect. And then lastly, I would say, like in all the modalities, all the different mind-body modalities, is that we trust this inner healer, this inner healing intelligence. And when we're doing work, and I want to come back to one other thing, is when you brought in the word yoga and the stillness and the silence. As a yoga teacher myself, yoga, the meaning of yoga is union, that yoke. What is it unifying? It's unifying the lower self and the higher self, the more dense self with the more refined self. And so this is a yoga as well, very much so, in the sense that it's unifying these more base parts of ourselves into the more refined, so naturally, without effort. It just comes. And one of the things that allows it to come is through the music. The music is carefully chosen, and that induces a state of entrainment. So we have this place where we're just carried by it. And the silence comes naturally. And I love what she said. It's so true. The children, without effort, just because they're entrained, they're carried into that stream of flow. I hope this helps.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Sri Aurobindo actually, in one of his very early on writings, he was very conscious. It's called the national value of art. And he was very conscious of how art can play a very important role, both visual and performing arts, in creating or facilitating a healthy, emotionally healthy society and nation. That's why he called it the national value of art.
Amazing.
And he speaks of art's role for Chittashuddhi. Chitta, as a Kundalini yoga teacher, Chitta is the one which has to be purified of all the lower movements of the prana, the passions, the strong instincts and things like that. And he said this is the first highest utility or highest mighty utility of art, something like that. I'm forgetting the exact phrase. Art for purification of the heart. So I'm just very thrilled to know that this is exactly the focus that you have through creative response therapy work that you do, and the inner healer. So thank you for bringing that aspect out. Can you share a little bit more about, and you also, Jayashree, you mentioned various techniques, I guess, face painting and creating masks, or spontaneous painting and few other things. If you can speak a little bit about some of those specific forms,
very gladly,
and that would be great.
And I just want to, if I may say one thing to what you just named around the healing aspect and the how much this could benefit society at the deepest healing levels. I want to also name a word here thanks to the beautiful research that's been happening the last 10, 15 years on trauma. One key word is titration. We can't just heal the trauma like that, whatever traumas we have in life. We have to dose it correctly. And so what's so beautiful with any expressive arts work, any art therapy or expressive art therapy work, is that it allows that go in, but it goes in through this intuitive knowing where the rational mind is kind of taking a little back seat, has no idea, what are we really even doing? And then we bring it in later. We bring it in later for the integration. But we're carried in, and there's just even, for example, in the painting, there's this back and forth, like looking at it, and then this listening in, what do I most need? And then going in. So I just really want to honor that role of titration automatically finds its way in this work.
Yeah,
so
great.
I just wanted to add that. So back to your question. So basically there's 6 modalities, and then there's kind of like some specializations under each modality. So there's spontaneous or intuitive painting. There is spontaneous clay, which in most cases, with children, it depends on the age, where we do it blindfolded. And, let me back up. On the spontaneous painting, over age 9, we do it with the left hand.
Okay.
Now, children that are right-handed, if they haven't mastered writing yet, that can be a bit of a challenge, it depends on how they've been raised as well. But so I've learned through experience to not push it. I invite it, but if they don't want to, it becomes too much of a stress point. But over 9, because they're already quite intuitive anyway, definitely under 7. So over 9 with the left hand. With the spontaneous clay, in most cases, depending on if someone's more fragile psychologically, and if they're younger children, it can be disorienting. But in most cases, if possible, we do it blindfolded. And we do it blindfolded so that we really stay intuitive, so that there's not the discerning eye to correct our piece as we're modeling the clay. So it becomes such a somatic, intuitive experience of projecting what we're feeling onto the clay in the most embodied way.
Wow.
It's a very, very powerful process. That's number 2. Number 3 is collage. Collage is interesting because in the way we have spontaneous painting, it's an organic representation, where with collage, it's a recognition. So I have a table full of images. What I do is I cut them more or less out ahead of time so that we don't have someone leafing through magazines and getting distracted, and we want to stay in that more right brain territory. So they are in a sea of images, and I give people usually a limit of 10, because if not, they'll be like, oh yes, and this one, and this one, and this one, and then the next thing you know, they have 25 images. And then it gets a little bit, so I keep it contained. That's always part of CRT. There's containment and freedom. Containment, freedom. So there's enormous freedom within a structure.
Very beautiful.
Enormous freedom.
Very beautiful.
So then they choose their 10 images, and there's this recognition that why? Because it's the world of symbol and archetypes. So the unconscious, every night we dream, whether we remember them or not, our dreams are always symbolic representations of content that we're processing and coming into wholeness around. And so the same thing happens when we're doing collage. It's like awake recognition. So it's, okay, yeah, that one. I don't know why it calls me, but that one calls me. Oh, and that one. No, that one. No. Oh, yeah. And it's so fascinating that link up, that connection. Why that image and not 5 others?
Yeah.
And there's an unconscious reason, but you don't need to know that just then. It'll reveal itself.
Yes.
And then there's this integration later where we do bring in the left brain through writing. And then we go back into the right brain through guided visualization through your creative piece. And then we go back out again and note in a more linguistic manner through that recognition of what was I actually accessing. And there's titration just in the process. So back to the modalities. So the collage was number 3. Then we have face mask. Face mask, like clay, is very embodied. It's a very powerful process. It takes a bit more setup in some ways, but it's very rich and very deep. Then we have coloring mandalas, which are very common. And I love the word mandala, which is circle and wholeness. And of course, the bindi. It's all about that coming into oneness. And a mandala, by the nature itself, it doesn't matter what the mandala is, there is always a center, and it will take you into wholeness. But when possible, I have them do it with the left hand. That's not always possible because it takes much, much longer.
Yeah.
That is one of the highest activities of being in the present moment. when you're working with the left hand, because you can't, as soon as you're with the right hand, if you're right-handed, you're going to get carried away. You're going to get into the future. But if you're with the left hand, you have to stay in the present moment. So that's the coloring mandalas. And then we have sand mandalas, which is very rich in its own right. And with the sand mandalas at the end, so you have little bits of all kinds of colored sand, and then we place, you fill in a mandala with the sand you choose. But at the end, we destroy it. So we know we're going to do that. So it works on a level of impermanence.
Yes.
And it works on these levels of ego death that are very powerful.
Yeah.
So within the spontaneous painting, which Jayashree mentioned, we have a couple that are some of my feature exercises. One is full body painting. So the person, the child or the adult lies down. Someone traces their entire outline, and then we put it either on the floor or up. So you've got a mirror image of yourself, and then I lead the person through a guided visualization through all the parts. With children, I go a lot faster because of attention spans. And then the unconscious kicks in right away. It's just waiting. And all the somatic content that's just waiting in the wings to express itself is so happy to come out. And it's extraordinary what reveals itself. Traumas, joys, hurts, love, self-love of the body, places where there's a lack of self-love, all of that content, injuries of different sort, whether physical or emotional, it's extraordinary. It's like an X-ray. It's like we're doing an X-ray of your entire being at some of the deepest somatic and spiritual levels. Because the chakras, some people have any kind of spiritual practice, the chakras will start revealing themselves organically without me saying a word. So it's magnificent. The other one that I do a lot, because one of my specialties is couples counseling. And one of the painting exercises I do is I lead them in a visualization, the person, and any current partner or any former partner, if they do, of course you have to be a certain age to do this. This wouldn't be necessarily applicable to children, or wouldn't be to children. But what you do is you visualize you and the other person. And this is excellent for more advanced work, where you paint yourself, you paint your partner, you paint your inner child, and you paint your partner's inner child. Revolutionary. But what I do is I do a modification of that, what I call dyad painting.
Okay.
So the same thing. So let's say with a child, with little children, it's harder, but let's say teenagers, because they're more sophisticated. You would say, okay, so let's say you're having a conflict with, whether it's your teacher, whether it's your parent, sibling, or a friend at school. You paint yourself, you paint that other, and you paint your vulnerable self, and you paint their vulnerable self. So I don't necessarily use inner child work because that might be a little too abstract for them. Just that vulnerable self. What we're instilling there is compassion, and the unconscious right away knows what that means. And sometimes it'll paint something and the person will be so surprised. So it's this amazing psycho-spiritual way of inducing forgiveness, ultimately.
Yes.
So,
and I saw that on your website. You said this is part of my life philosophy, forgiveness and compassion. So yes, thank you. Beautiful, Cyntha. I want to go back to Jayashree, what you said, and which I really admire and appreciate about the work, the kind of work that you do at Creative, that you don't want to offer anything to children which you yourself and among the teachers have not experimented on. So what has been in your observation, the response of the teachers? You said you were currently training 25 teachers, but those who've already gone through Cyntha's CRT or other modalities, what has been their response in your observation in terms of their own healing work or letting go of past traumas or whatever, so that they can bring their more authentic self to the classroom? Because that's very important when you're working with children. So
I also want to add something here. Not only are the teachers trained, I myself
yes, of course. And
so,
yes, I mean,
without me training, I can't offer it.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
This is the first. Actually, so far we don't have a large group that has been trained. It's been of maybe about 10 people who have gone through this. And in terms of experience, see, two things that are very interesting. One is CRT starts bringing out, in the beginning, everyone is trying to make it look pretty. Because the first tendency to work with art is to make it look beautiful. And then you get to drop it. Because, the way Cyntha leads as well is it's very non-judgmental. And after a while, you just drop it and you start allowing not just the pretty colors to come out, but you start allowing the darker shades to come out. And the process of the art, especially non-dominant art, being physical, itself works out the emotion to an extent. And I see this not only with teachers, I see it with adolescents as well. I'll come to adolescents in a little while. So for the teachers, many things have opened up. One is their capacity to trust intuition, the capacity to follow your inner guidance in doing the art rather than an end objective. Okay, I have to make it look like this. Oh, I have to do a Taj Mahal or a flower or a house. You're drawing very abstract. Your paintings are very abstract. So it puts you in the realm of listening to your inner voice. Unless a teacher learns to listen to their inner voice, how are we going to listen to the inner voices of children? Right? So the very first thing that spontaneous painting does or clay does, we always do blindfolded clay in school, again, from 5th grade upwards. With the younger ones, they just play with clay. That's a different, but CRT, it's such, with clay, we have 5th grade and upwards. So with teachers or with children, the capacity to be able to engage in art without having an end goal is probably the biggest and the most beautiful outcome, if one were to call it an outcome. It's opening up of the journey of art rather than the end result of art. So the journey gets emphasized more. And that's something that I want in all my teachers. I want it for science and for language and for math. So but we're going to train a bunch of teachers to actually facilitate. But all teachers immerse once a month. We've been giving the spontaneous painting activity for teachers just for themselves, not to facilitate for children. But once a month, everyone just gets together and they paint. It may not go, when Cyntha is there, she goes into more depths of the therapeutic aspect. And when I've been facilitating, it's been more to allow the intuitive self. And I do use the basic cues that have already been set beautifully by Cyntha. And even at that level, we find it highly freeing. Just being able to be spontaneous because the school is both wonderfully flowing, there is also a structure, there's also a discipline. So having that outlet for the teachers where they can just be and be spontaneous without, and we are constantly analyzing, right? We are analyzing ourselves, our classrooms, we are analyzing children. So during this time, we just are being there with the paints and being there and allowing whatever it is, maybe something dark, maybe something beautiful to come out. So that's something, thank you, Cyntha, for bringing that. Once a month over the last 9 years, once or twice a month, once in 2 months, I've been just offering the basics to my teachers as well. So, the second aspect, coming to older children, even though we have a lot of self-awareness processes, once children reach adolescence, the ego sets in more. So, younger children are very vulnerable, even in an environment where we encourage a lot of vulnerability. Once they come to adolescence, they kind of, okay, what are you going to think about me? What are you going to think about me? Art breaks that. Because when you have to put words to what I'm feeling and what I'm doing, there's a little bit, the ego comes up more. With spontaneous painting, there is more room. Maybe the first 2 or 3 times with adolescents, they'll be looking to see what is the other done, and then they'll do it. But even then, even with that much of self-consciousness coming in, it is still brings in more silence in them than without it. But once they go past 2 or 3 sessions, they start freeing up. They don't need to worry about what their peers are doing. And that's when full body in particular can really help. It's also very interesting to see the difference between the genders here. I'm not trying to generalize, but with the boys, you'll always find somebody drawing Superman or, their best version is what comes out when you do full body. With the girls, it'll be more starry and more rainbows and more skies. But the girls can get little more, maybe because of the gender differences that exist in society. Girls tend to get a little vulnerable sooner. And that's not to, we have many boys as well who are very ready to get vulnerable and explore themselves. But it does take about 3 or 4 sessions before they're ready to open up. And yeah, so again, that intuitive part. I want to give some examples.
Sure.
There was this kid who was very angry about something. And some of the children are very close to either me or, we have other facilitators in school, yet was hesitating. There was a CRT session for teenagers, and all she painted was red. She painted red, then she painted black on top, and then red on top again, and black on top again. At the end of it, she said, I don't know what I worked out, but I'm fine. Sometimes they don't know what they worked out, but the process of the art itself is healing. So I agree, there's beautiful integration, but sometimes kids who are not ready to express it out through art, and they are done. So I've seen, for adolescents in particular, in cases where they just don't want to open up to anybody, CRT is wonderful because the lack of words helps them. They don't want to put words to what you're going through, but they're able to work it out, and somatically and in their body, they feel better later. So I really wanted to bring that out with adolescents. It's been phenomenal to have them work out. And clay is, I can't tell you enough about clay. And the work, especially post-COVID, even though our teachers, bless them, put in so much effort to make online schooling wonderful, in my humble opinion, online schooling did not work for children. Because when they were online, with the internet on, with the current social media trends, which are very addictive in nature, one kid starts it, on the side they were having other things going on while the lesson was on, and it's impossible for the teacher to relate at that level. So post-COVID, when kids came back to school, there was a lot of restlessness. They were no longer used to the kind of engagement they could do. They had lost that. There was also a lot of, to put it bluntly, rubbish they had picked up from social media and other influencers. The language, we were, honestly, as teachers, we were shocked because the kind of language that was there pre-COVID versus post-COVID, it just was completely different. And we knew, they're clearly up to something else. So we had tried talking to them about it. We had tried other forms of art. 2 things in particular worked. CRT, again, because it gave the anonymity. Without words, it gave them the anonymity to work it out. Clay, CRT, the spontaneous painting in clay worked very well for them. So every time kids come back from holidays, the first 2 months, what we work with is CRT.
Wow.
That grounds them, it settles, and it frees us teachers from going on saying, come on, let's be more respectful. Let's be more respectful. How many times can we say that, right? Because they have to work it out from within. The second aspect that we needed to do was also to spend 5 days in nature without any phones, without any communication. This is not related to the topic, but I just want to mention both for completeness. And it's, that's when Sri Aurobindo's, that's also coincidentally when I really started getting to know you. And we use not only CRT as art, but I think what helped children in our school recover from COVID is primarily arts education. The fine arts, the performing arts, working out their emotions, not with words, but working it out physically through dance, through theater, through CRT, through other forms of art, and spending a lot of time in the hills without any phone. It took a 5-day trek for children to realize they were addicted. At the end of it, they came back and said, Auntie, oh my God, I was so addicted to my phone. And no matter how much we told them, they couldn't feel it. So just imagine being able to go to the hills and do art. right?
Yeah, wow.
It can really work it out. And I sincerely, this is my request, and I know your intention is to reach out to many schools. Do not think of arts as just arts education, as a separate subject, but arts needs to be the foundation of education and the foundation for self-awareness, for self-growth, for self-expression, because that will free children. It's not like it's going to solve everything, but for that moment when they come back into their healthy self, it's worth everything. And the more opportunities for that we can give over a period of time, they may internalize that, oh, I can be healthy again. And as young adults, when they go out into this world, in today's world with college and universities and all the trappings, maybe these memories that they carry of their body being free, of their heart being free, will guide them. Because ultimately, it's their inner experience that's going to guide them. And for that, I'm very grateful to Cyntha and, our teachers who have held space for children. Yeah.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. So every time we spend about a week at Creative, I know the fact that, phones don't work, signals don't work. It's actually a very big relief that, certain things can be just let go. World is not going to collapse if you don't check your WhatsApp every hour or something like that. But so yes, it's not just for children or teenagers, adolescents, all of us. So phones and technology has become such a part of our lives that to experience some sort of escape from that and to go within, and art and nature of course can be great means to do that. So thank you for sharing all the beautiful work that you do with the children and how children respond to that. That's very heartwarming to hear. And as you said, it is for all colleges and schools to think in terms of taking art as the basis, because this used to be the way in India education was understood or art was understood. There was not this kind of compartment between art, education, and life. It was all part of one, growth, one holistic growth process. But somewhere along the lines, we ourselves have forgotten, gone away from that tradition. So to bring it back in a new way, I think what you are doing at Creative is a very beautiful example, a living illustration of that. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for making us a part, to experience a part of that when we visit there. And now that you have this beautiful Auro Art Center, which I'm sure you worked with just recently when you were there. So let me just go back to you again, Cyntha. In your work that you have done with Creative School, both with teachers and with students, and in the other work that you do across the world with couples or in individual, in other group settings, what was different that you found in educational context, like a more organized teaching learning context as compared to other contexts in which you work, using some of the same modalities, which is unique to the education?
You mean like what's different about Creative?
First of all, Creative is a unique ed school in that sense. So maybe just...
I'll start there.
Yeah.
And then also education. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So first of all, why am I always so happy to come back? It's so inspiring to have on the planet a place like Creative and Prajña to exist and have these values so incorporated, so embodied, so lived. And then CRT just slots right in. It just fits right in. It's the perfect territory, space to be doing it. I feel like I'm not coming up against something, it's welcomed. And the teachers, when I'm training, for example, anyone there, whether it's children or teachers, I brought in a couple of years ago when we were doing the work online, I brought in an English, one of my more advanced students. I had her come and assist. And when these children would speak and when they would have the level of self-awareness after, when they were processing their creations, whatever it was, she would look at me on the Zoom and just just say, oh my God, silently, how is it possible these children speak like this? How do they have this level of self-awareness, this level of articulation? And that's Creative fostering that all the time, making it so safe for them. So even if there's resistances and there's rebellion and there's that ego territory of being an adolescent, it's still, there's such an awareness. So I just can't say enough, in terms of that. Now, as far as education, it's kind of a continuation of what I said, is that what I love is when I have the opportunity to bring it in anywhere, what I'm helping to do is reclaim this right brain faculty. And I love what Jayashree said about how sometimes with certain people, it takes 3-4 sessions to warm them up and to let go into just surrendering. This is consistently the case. But what it does is and I love what she said about intuition, that place where you're trusting your intuition rather than the achieved goal. It's not about an end goal. It's about, what do I feel I want to express in this moment? And this, I've done it in corporate settings. I've done it in some peace settings, like conflict resolution settings. It allows, there's always this element of surprise, like, oh, and you watch the ego, a bit of a freak out, like, oh my goodness, like, what does this mean? And yet the truth is there. Yeah. And I just use it, as I mentioned to you recently, I just use it as, I was in a year-long master's thesis process for research, and used it there for the participants to get to the truth of what they really felt about the subject that I was researching. That was, of the 3 modalities I used, or the 3 ways of data collection, the spontaneous painting was the most accurate, the most revelatory, the most telling, and gave us the most important, compelling data than anything else that we did in that research project. So here's another example of the power of that. The truth comes out, in the spirit of Sat Nam. Like, your truth will come up through there, despite your ego having a bit of a panic.
Wow. I love what you said about the truth. I mean, and I saw on your website, you've also used art for truth and reconciliation work. And so, in terms of societies and nations globally, we need a lot of that work. But there is a lot of individual-based truth and reconciliation work also that we need to do. So, I mean, you beautifully said, Satnam, taking that very idea of, taking the name of truth does wonders. So to express it through art, I'm just so touched. And next time she's coming, I'm coming to Creative. I mean, I mean, to do a whole 1 week of my own truth and reconciliation work. So that would be great.
And I just want to say something about CRT that's so important, and it highlights, and it's highlighting it now all over the world, is the necessity of trauma-informed education. This is, and it's very much present at Creative and Prajña Wisdom Center. This necessity of, we can't pretend we don't know. There's so much beautiful research now with Stephen Porges and looking at what happens physiologically. There's so many, I could name many, many practitioners that really honor addiction, Gabor Mate, honoring what happens when trauma is unhealed. And so being trauma informed the teachers, the educators, are so trauma-informed at Creative that they bring that wisdom and that empathetic eye, that compassionate heart, and then using modalities to escort that trauma towards healing. This is primordial as well.
So is it okay if you describe a bit of what trauma-informed means?
Yes.
Our audience may.
Okay, thanks.
That'd be great. Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So trauma-informed is first recognizing that there's 4 types of basic trauma. Well, I mean, maybe 5. So there's verbal abuse, there's physical abuse, there's psychological/emotional abuse, there's sexual abuse, and then there's something like a 5th one we would call maybe religious abuse, spiritual abuse, societal abuse. It's these territories that are coming from institutions that, we hear it all the time. Like, for example, I've had a lot of people in Britain have come to me that were in boarding school. And so it wasn't like one person, it was the whole institution of boarding school. It was a very traumatic experience for many of them. Certain people that come to me from so I've been based in Dubai for the last 26 years. Many of them, some of them grew up in a more moderate approach to Islam. Others grew up in a much more rigid, dogmatic approach. And they have huge trauma. I grew up in a Catholic background in the States. A lot of them have that Catholic trauma that's quite notorious and well known in certain circles. So that is abuse. So any of those abuse is recognizing what is even abuse. A lot of people say, oh, no, that's too harsh of a word. well, actually, sometimes we need to strip it down. It is abuse. It's that naked reality. It's abusive. And what is trauma? It's any place that overwhelmed the nervous system. So one person may have been traumatized by something, someone else won't be traumatized by that. It's where it overwhelms someone's nervous system to be able to respond to the situation.
Yeah.
And then the responses to trauma. The classic one is fight back, run away, flight,
Fight or flight. Yeah.
freeze, where you freeze, go numb. These are more secondary. Hypervigilance afterwards, and a collapse. And then also we have this, there's all kinds of psychosomatic manifestations that then follow from there as well, if it's still not processed. Because the being is always seeking wholeness. The being is always wanting to come back into wholeness. So the body will respond. So this is the beginning of being trauma informed.
And through art, these things come through.
Inevitably.
So this is really, the Chittashuddhi with which we started this whole conversation, because the nervous system is such a big part of the lower realms of the being that we have to purify, that we have to, whatever the granthis, as we call in Indian language, they have to be let go, they have to be unknotted. So that part is so beautiful that art can bring that out. And I think at some place, Sri Aurobindo writes about how art, and he talks about all expressions of art, music, poetry, visual arts, painting, sculpture. It's an education for the soul. And what I think we've heard today from both your experience and your experience at Creative, and how you are implementing art-based healing work at Creative and Prajña, is really creating that, sort of making alive the idea of education for the soul. So there can be so many theories written on psychic education or vital taking to psychic education, but this is really a living example of that. So thank you so much for bringing that.
Just wanted to add a few things.
Please.
Since Cyntha's, you've beautifully explained the whole context. So I just wanted to talk a little bit in very practical ways on, if you know a child has gone through some kind of, about it, how do we approach it? See, being a school context, we also have to be careful not to open up everything everywhere.
Yeah.
So some of the deeper cases are taken up as one-on-one sessions. That's where Prajña, the wisdom center, the healing center comes in, where a child receives the right kind of counseling or the right kind of art therapy. The breath is also very powerful. So the beauty of it is, when a child is able to let go, make sense of this and heal it in their adolescent years, they are free. Otherwise, this sits there, and as adults, it takes much longer for us to. And one doesn't, when things happen in their childhood, just the process of having regular spontaneous painting, our pranayamas, our yogas, our meditation, a chance to express in a safe environment itself, when they come out, they're carrying less of a load. I'm not claiming that we cannot take care of everything, but we can be present with it. And we can, like we said, our teachers are sensitized to recognize things that are not looking all right, and to be able to address it using the right modalities. Sometimes it would mean private sessions. We can't do everything in public. Sometimes through the process of spontaneous painting or through the process of group work, without even expressing, they are able to express on paper, which is what I love. I know I go on and on about spontaneous painting, because kids who will not open up and speak get to express through paints. Because the painting doesn't have to look good. It's just, you look at the paper and it's almost like everything has come out on it. And you'll have grays and blacks and browns, and it doesn't look like anything. Then oh my God, this kid has really been authentic. So CRT is a very powerful way in which we can help them help themselves. If they choose to, they may express more. I also want to really call this out, because this is an important area in India. We have young adolescents who have gone through sexual abuse at younger years, and we have taken CRT with them and been able to do some of the painting work where they've been able to express it, let it go, take back their sense of, because there's a loss of power, there's a loss of confidence with that. And
shame.
And a lot of shame.
Yeah.
So this is very delicate work. It needs training, it needs sensitivity to be able to hold this. But I wanted to stretch the idea that adolescents, if they are given the right outlet and the right healing support through a proper facility, can walk out of school, can walk out of education lighter and more whole. And like you beautifully brought it, it's the vital to psychic. When they regain their wholeness, they regain their confidence, because life happens. It's not just because somebody is at creative school doesn't mean that life doesn't happen. It happens in so many ways. And having the teachers aware of changes in the child's patterns and being able to give it the right kind of attention can make a big difference. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I just wanted to share that as well.
I'm really happy you did, Jayashree, because this really puts things in context. And as we sort of come to the close of this conversation, I'm again reminded of something so profound and important that we have from Sri Aurobindo, where he speaks about education of the future. So this is something that he was writing in terms of, where he was talking about how education was in ancient India. But he said, moving forward with our eyes to the future, we have to keep the timeless spiritual wisdom that we have received from our rishis and sages and seers, but bring in all the new work, the new modalities, the new research that has come out there in the field of education and expansion of consciousness and growth of consciousness, because that would be the true futuristic education moving forward. And it's not just for India, but for the entire world. And Mother was very clear that the principle of integral education, when it allows certain, whatever is unique to a certain cultural, civilizational context, those things added to the first principles of integral education, it is in a way a universal education for the entire humanity. So what I've heard from both of you today is again beautiful assimilation and integration of the new work that is happening in the field of art-based learning or art-based truth and reconciliation work or therapeutic work or healing work, and integrating it into educational approaches which are based on the timeless wisdom of our culture, our civilization.
May I say one little thing? You just brought in something that's so important that I love. It shows up. Wherever I've done CRT, anywhere in the world, I don't come in with a spiritual agenda. I never come in with one spiritual philosophy, but the practice itself allows the person to organically contact their own spiritual context.
Yes.
And there's a quality of grace. There's a quality of transcendence in a grounded way. That's the irony. It's not spiritual bypassing. On the contrary, it is so spiritual because it's the true essence of spirituality.
Yes.
So I just want to honor everything what you were saying.
And it's universal. It's timeless. It's eternal.
timeless.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you so
may
much.
I also add one more to what Cyntha and you said. Not only, I know we talked a lot about children, the number of teachers who benefit from the trauma healing work, because we've all gone through systems which are not as whole, not integral. So we need to do our own inner work as well, so that we're able to hold that space. A new education deserves us to invest in ourselves and come into our whole being.
Yes, a space for progress for all.
Progress
Inner
for
and outer
parents,
progress.
progress for teachers, progress for administrators.
Yes,
Our sports teachers need it too. It's not. It's not only for it's for all.
At one point, when I was here in 2019, she invited me to give to all the drivers, to all the cooks, to all the staff. It was so special, so incredibly special to give to the entire staff at Creative.
That's really Mother's vision for the future schools that we need. Future school to no school. Because I don't even want to use the word school anymore to talk about creative. So, because school has such a, the baggage that the term has.
But it's really with the Mother's support, with Sri Aurobindo's, the vision that has kept me going, and seeing the possibilities and the support of people like Cyntha and Belu and Narendraji, all of you who have come to Creative and given the talks, Biswajita, all of you who've come in here and make it that rich community experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
For that also.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing all your insight and wisdom with us, with our audience. And I'm sure many more things are coming up as we move forward in the future. Thank you so much
Thank you so much
for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.